Hello, all my adoring, screaming fans. Thank you for that welcome. That was very kind of you. Hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to this very special Wednesday night live. It's meant to be Songwriting Simplified. Jonny has had to go and take care of some family business at the very last minute, so he contacted me just recently and said, "Hey, can you do the show?" Because he needs to go and take care of that. So that is why we are here on my channel tonight instead of over on Jonny's and us hosting it together. We did have a subject lined up for tonight as well, which we will do next week. We won't do it this week because it's just me, and subjects like what we had in mind really work better when there's both me and Jonny available. So we won't do that. So instead, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take your questions for the next hour, basically, and we can talk. Mostly, I would like to keep it focused on songwriting, composing, arranging, and that kind of thing. So we can talk orchestration, we can talk writing for horn section, we can talk backing vocals, we can talk writing for orchestra. Any of those kind of arranging subjects we can cover. Any questions you got about lyrics, we can talk about that as well. Harmony, chord changes, that kind of stuff. Different styles we can talk about as well. So I would love it if you guys really get busy typing and get your questions into the chat, and I will do my best to get them as quickly as I can. The thing to do when you're asking a question is to type at Jonny Lipsham Studios. That way I get a nice kind of red box and I can see that is something that is directed to me rather than just you guys kind of talking amongst yourselves. Talking amongst yourselves is absolutely fine. I have no problems with it. Just kind of make sure you leave the profanity at home, but you are at home. Leave your profanity out of the chat. I have my moderators here. Just Bob is here, and I think Mike Neighbor will be here at some point if he's not already. But certainly I have one moderator here who will take care of business and make sure that the chat stays nice and clean. But yeah, I hope you like the new intro. I was just doing that just for fun. I have a whole bunch of sounds from various soundboards. I've spent some of this evening just downloading stuff from soundboards. And some of the soundboards are hilarious. There's a Darth Vader one. There's a Judge Judy one. There's an Arnold Schwarzenegger one. And it's basically just made up of little kind of snippets of kind of famous sayings from their films or from their TV shows. And they're great fun. So the one that I used to start with is from an audience sound effects soundboard, which is great because I have people that can laugh at my jokes. Albeit they didn't find that one particularly funny, but they're there. They're there. My little audience are there, which is nice. So been having fun with that. So, let's see who is here. Marcos and Thomas are here. Just Bob, as I mentioned already. John Edgar is here. Kevin's Guitar Stories is here. Awesome. Hi, Kevin. Garen and Alps Media LLC, the sponsors for Home Studio Trainer. I am not Home Studio Trainer, but Jonny and I have been partners in crime for many years. Probably nearly 7 years now that he and I have been working together on various stuff on his channel and on my channel as well. My channel would not exist if it hadn't been for Jonny Guibe, and I wouldn't have made all the videos that I have made if it hadn't been for him. So yeah, so he and I have been partners for a long time, and it is really, 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 really cool that he has finally found a sponsor for his show and for his channel and for his business and what he does. I'm so glad Louis from Alps Media is taking care of him, and they have a great thing going. So I'm very, very pleased and very proud to have Alps Media in the chat as well on my shows, which is great. It's very kind. Let's see, who else do we have here? I think that might be it. Mika's here as well. Martin Weeks is here. Vital Caron, who I've not seen in a while. Vital, good to see you. And Dwayne is here. No Bobby Booth as yet. But that's okay. And already you guys are chucking in comments here, which is great. We all need applause from the audience. Applause. Can I do applause? Let me see. Have I got a good applause? Here we go. Oh, that's loud. That's short and sweet. But there you go. All right. So let's get into questions and see what you guys are starting to get into the chat and see what I can answer. And bear in mind, I might not be able to answer everything, but I will certainly do my best. Music to is it music to motion? Okay. Just Bob with the first question, I think. Let me see. Martin says, how about a serious look into the UJAM strings VST, as it really comes with amazing string arrangements, not to mention all the other cool stuff. UJAM stuff, as I think I said on Sunday, is awesome. Whatever product it is you have from UJAM, they come with a bunch of incredible samples of phrases and instruments that are really, really playable and really, really useful from an arranging point of view as well, if you want to sketch out your ideas. And in fact, you know what? I've even used UJAM Fat, one of the drum sets that they've got there. I've actually used that on a final product. I didn't just use it as kind of a loop to work out and sketch out the song. And I normally do that when, once I'm starting to get my scratch tracks into Studio One, I use something like UJAM as basically a drum machine. But in this case, I actually kept it because it sounded great and it did exactly what I needed it to do. So I used it. And the strings is pretty much just like that, although I don't have it. But it is really, really, really good. And unfortunately, I can't really go seriously deep into it because I don't actually have the strings. Sorry about that. Just Bob says, and everyone else, what do you believe is the biggest mistake people make when starting to write music, assuming they are just at the beginner stage? I think the biggest mistake, and I'm speaking purely from my perspective, because I started writing music really young. Like whilst I must have been about, I'm trying to think. How old was I? I must have been about 7 or 8 when I first started actually writing notation. And, writing out chord changes and writing out lyrics and melody lines and that kind of thing. I would have been about 7 or 8 maybe. And I think the first mistake that I made was trying to do something too big, too soon. And I think a lot of people do that. They try to make their songs too complicated way too soon before they are ready. They have these big ideas. And I totally understand having big ideas and being really excited about your big ideas. But the thing that people can do, the mistake that people can make is that they go, I want to have a string quartet, I want to have brass, I want to have saxophones, I want to have barbershop backing vocals, I want to have, this nice rhythm section, I want this kind of, Phil Spector wall of sound kind of production. That's what you hear in your head. But, what's in your head is often way ahead of what you can actually deliver with your hands or with your, with your skills as a musician or as a composer. And that's kind of the big mistake that most people make. I made it myself. The first tune that I wrote, the first song that I wrote when I was about 7 years old, I wrote something for my sister to sing at a school concert. And I wanted the whole school band involved. But here's the thing, I just didn't know how to write for those instruments. I didn't know how to write for brass. I didn't understand the concept of transposition. I didn't understand that if you voice strings with brass together at the same time, in the same range, the same register, the brass will totally blow away the strings and you won't hear the strings because brass is way more powerful sounding. It's louder than strings. So you have to do it with care. I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea what I was doing when it comes to arranging of any kind. So, and, the other thing was I had no idea how, the ability of the people at our school, how good they were. Could they play, complicated runs? No, they couldn't. Could they play, complicated chord changes? No, they couldn't. I didn't really think about that. I just wrote what was in my head and I got it down onto paper and I said, hey, this will be great to sing. And nobody could play it. And it was embarrassing, to say the least. But I learned an important lesson. To write within what I am physically capable of myself and write within what is physically possible on the instruments and write within what is possible by the people performing on those instruments, what they are capable of on those instruments. Not everybody is going to be a genius on their instrument. They might actually be fairly, low skilled on their instruments, and I have to be able to take those things into account. So I learned to research. I learned to find out what is the playing range of a flute, what is the playing range of a bassoon. Is the bassoon a transposing instrument, or is it a concert pitch instrument like the flute is? What's the playing range of an alto saxophone? What key is that instrument in, and how do I transpose for that? So there were those kind of considerations that I have had to learn, and the way you learn them is by watching videos nowadays, but certainly back in the 80s, the way you did it was you read books. I read books on arranging. When I was at school, the rest of my class were reading comics. I was reading books on arranging. I was reading books on composition. I was reading treatises on harmony. That's what I was doing at school. So, I think the biggest mistake is doing too much too soon. So kind of start out nice and simple. If you're going to write, write small. Write for instruments that are easy. So they are concert pitch instruments like piano, like bass, like flute and voice. They are all concert pitch instruments. You can write for those fairly easily. And keep it nice and simple. Keep your harmony nice and simple. Keep your form and your structure nice and simple, and move along. And gradually you will grow and your skill set will expand. Now I can write for an orchestra, no problem. And I can write for a big band, no problem. And all of those kind of sounds that were in my head when I was a kid, I can deliver very easily now. But you have to start kind of small, with small little building blocks first. And then you get good at building a small little wall with those small little building blocks. And then eventually you can start thinking about, great, I can build a wall. That means I can build 3 other walls. Hey, now I've got a square. Fantastic. Well, now I can put some floor in. Okay, I've put a couple of planks of wood down. Great. Now I can start putting some more in. And before you know it, you are able to build a house. So I hope you understand kind of where I'm going with that. But yeah, I think the biggest mistake is trying to do too much too soon. Music Motion says, not sure how to explain it, but I'm working on a few songs for a children's TV show. Upbeat, fun, quirky is the sort of description the brief is asking for. Any thoughts on a fun top-end instrument for lead melody? I was thinking marimba or something like that. Marimba would be nice, but you could also, rather than just having the one lead instrument, have maybe 2 or 3, and have them kind of change, do a little bit of call and response. Give each of those lead instruments a personality. So maybe your marimba person, because marimba is actually quite a low-pitched percussion instrument. So think about the sound that that has, and then think about the personality that that sound might engender, and then maybe contrast that with something like a clarinet. There's lots you can do with a clarinet. You can do, that long, smooth glissando that you hear in the beginning of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. So, kind of pick a couple of lead instruments that are going to interact with each other well and have contrasting personalities that you can do different things with, and you can engage in a little bit of call and response with those instruments. Kids engage really, really well with that kind of thing, and they engage really, really well with silly sounds. So make them do silly things, like, swooping glissandos, like, playing absurdly low. The shallow register, which is the low register of the clarinet, sounds very warm, rich, and romantic, whereas the marimba is quite brittle, and yet, has some low mids to the sound as well. But it's a percussion instrument, whereas the clarinet is a reed instrument. So there are contrasting textures and tones that you can play with. And you can do that. And the secret with kids' music is, even if it's complicated, make it sound simple, even if it isn't. Like, kids love motifs. Little 5-6 note motifs that you can just chuck around between these two instruments. You can transpose them, you can turn them upside down, you can make the marimba play, you could have the clarinet play a phrase, then the marimba plays the same phrase but backwards. Or you can transpose the clarinet's phrase up a step or something like that. And then you could have the marimba answer that by playing the same phrase but an octave lower, but backwards and upside down. So there's lots of different variations you can play with, and kids identify with those things, especially if it's a jaunty little melody. So you can have so much fun with kids' music. I have written songs for children a lot because about 10 years ago, I and a team of about 8 or 9 of us were tasked by the Indian government to write a music curriculum for their schools, for mostly their young kids' schools, what we in the UK would call primary school, which is kind of like, in Scotland it's 4 to 11, down in England it's 5 to 11. So we were tasked with writing a brand new curriculum from scratch, because what they had before was very, very out of date, maybe 50 or 60 years out of date. And the teaching methodology was all completely ancient, and the kids just could not and would not relate to it. So we were tasked by the Indian government to come up with something different. So over the course of about 18 months, we wrote a brand new curriculum. And that meant we had to write a whole bunch of songs that the kids could engage with and that would teach them musical concepts. So I wrote hundreds of kids' songs in English and in Hindi. And I didn't know any Hindi, but one of the guys on the team did, because he had spent a lot of time out in India. It was him that got us the gig in the first place. So he did a lot of the translating into Hindi. But it was so much fun. And you can even write songs that actually sound surprisingly, kind of adult contemporary rock music. But they really appeal to kids as well. So kind of do a little bit of research is another thing that I would suggest. But I hope that answers your question there. But marimba is a good suggestion. Martin says, is that audience from the BBC Sound Libraries that was free a while back? No, it isn't. It's from a completely different soundboard altogether. The website is called realmofdarkness.net. You can go and check it out yourself. Let's see. Alps Media says, we enjoy the both of you. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I do appreciate your support. And the chat kind of jumped a wee bit there. Let me roll back to where that was. Okay, here we go. Okay, I found my spot. And we got some donations. I'll get to your donations in just a second, folks. Thank you very, very much. You are very, very kind, all of you. That would be awesome. I'm at work on my phone, so I can't tag anyone. How would I find you, lads? Okay, I think you guys are talking amongst yourselves. That's cool. Yes, we need applause from the audience for Alps music. I think we probably do. Let's see. How about this one? Okay, there you go. Let's see. John Edgar asks, composers sometimes have to deal with rejection. What do you mean sometimes? Quite often. What are some methods you have discovered that work to keep things moving forward? That is a really good question. You have to have a very thick skin. Let me have some cup of tea. You have to have a very thick skin to maintain any kind of career in the music industry in any part of it. Whether you are just working in a band and you play the pub circuit, and you're part-time, you all have day jobs and you play gigs by night, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week, and you play the pub circuit. You still have to have a thick skin, because there are still going to be people that say, you're crap. You're not very good. We don't like your sound. We think you're awful. You're going to get that. You know, whether you're playing pubs or whether you're playing jazz clubs or whether you're, you know, playing much larger arenas, you're still going to get that. And you're still, you know, going to get people that will... This is bizarre, but there are definitely people who actually enjoy disliking things. They actually enjoy disliking people. It's something that, you know, it gives them a sense of purpose of some kind. And those people will follow you around, and what they will do is they will make it their business to dislike everything that you do. So if you put out an album, they will give you a 1-star rating, and they'll maybe put some unkind comments. Or if you put out a video on YouTube, they will be the person that hits the dislike button first, or they'll put some other unkind comment under your video as well. You know, they'll either do one or the other, or they'll do both. Now, there are lots of ways that you can handle those kind of people. The most productive way I have found to handle those people is to say, this person has an opinion. I may not like their opinion, but that is their opinion. They just don't like either me personally, or they don't like my songs, and they don't like the way I play my songs. Or they don't like my videos. They don't like the way I produce my videos. They don't like the subjects that I cover. They don't like the fact that my Sunday Night Live show is by and largely improvised. They don't like that. They have an opinion. They're entitled to voice their opinion. And actually, the other thing you have to think about is you have to not only have a really thick skin, but I think you have to have something really, really vital that is incredibly hard to cultivate, because trying to cultivate this thing is a little bit like trying to chase the wind and catch the wind. even, with those 1980s air grabs. And that is humility. It's really hard. It's really hard. Because, when you've just played your socks off at a gig and you are dripping with sweat from all the energy you have put into your performance, and this person comes up to you and the first thing out of their mouth is, well, that was crap, wasn't it? That was awful. You're rubbish. Your first instinct is going to want to probably be to punch them. Well, the thing that I've learned about reacting in that kind of way is that if you do that, it may well, for a short time, be incredibly satisfying. And you may go, that felt really, really good. I'm glad I punched that guy. Maybe he won't behave like that next time. Yeah, maybe he won't. But maybe you might have just enraged him and made him 10 times worse than he was that night. So for me, what I do is I try and disarm people. So if people are going to come up to me and be aggressive about, what they have to say, then I try and disarm it and say, okay, that's fine. If that's how you feel about my music, that's great. You don't have to listen to it. You don't have to come to my shows. You don't have to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You don't have to watch any of my videos. I appreciate it when you do. I appreciate the fact that you've made the effort to come here. I appreciate the fact that you've hit the subscribe button. I appreciate the fact that you actually watch the videos. Maybe at some stage they might be of help to you, but maybe right now you're just not able to receive that. But you know what? The fact that you're here is a big step forward. And then I would walk away at that point and go and talk to somebody who is a little bit more positive. But what do I do with those things that people say about me? What do I do with those things that people say about my music? Because my music is actually pretty personal, to be honest, because they are stories and they are characters that I have created. It's not just about the rhymes and the chord changes and the clever turns of phrase and, the jazz improvisations and all of that. That's a part of it, but these are people that inhabit my brain, they inhabit my world, and I have plucked them out and put them into these songs. So they're quite personal. So if somebody says, that's rubbish, that's awful, those characters suck, what do I do with that? Well, I think about two things. Number one, could he be right? Or she? Could he or she be right? Number two, in what way could she or he be right? And number three, the other thing that I then think about is I think about what could I do to make my characters better? What could I do to make my narratives more engaging? What could I do to make my music more satisfying to listen to? How could I improve that person's listening experience? So I take what negative things they have to say to me, which, to them, it may well have been very satisfying to say, you're rubbish. I know I'm not rubbish, so I can bat that away straight away. Doesn't bother me. People say to me, hey, you can't sing in tune. Well, I know for a fact that I can because I've been singing since I was 5 years old, and I was top of my class for singing and for vocals at school and at college and at university, so I know I can sing in tune. That doesn't mean that necessarily you like my tone. That's okay. That's a personal choice. I can so that I can kind of bat away. That's their personal choice. Okay, fine, whatever. You have your personal choice. I have mine. I'm happy with mine. You're happy with yours. Fine. Neither the twain shall meet, and that's okay. So that's how I deal with potential rejection. But there is another level of rejection, and that is when you submit your work to get paid for that work. And let's say you're submitting for film, because I know some of you guys submit for TV and you submit for film, you submit for sync licensing and that kind of thing. It gets a little bit more hurtful when you work hard at fulfilling the brief to the best of your ability, you submit the work, and then the producer or the director, or both sometimes, will contact you and say, we don't want your music. We don't think it fits our film. We don't think it fits our show. And you may well have put quite a bit of work into it. And you could potentially take that personally. When I was younger, I did take that pretty personally. And I'd be like, well, screw you then. I'll go and find other people who will like my music. And I'd stride off, and chuck my toys out the pram. Not necessarily the most mature reaction. For me, where I am now, and having worked with a lot of people in the music business over, 30 years or so, I'm at the position where if somebody does that to me and they say, we don't think that the music you've worked on suits our particular show, or it doesn't really suit our channel, it doesn't fit with the channel's image, or, the channel's sound, doesn't really fit with it, doesn't really fit with the show, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. And the thing is, I have written some music. I can use that music somewhere else because they haven't bought it. They have not bought the rights to that music. It's mine still. I can now recycle that and I can use that somewhere else. I can take those motifs, I can take those chord changes, I can take that whole rhythm section, supplant it into a completely different song and use it for something else. It's their loss, it's my gain. That's how I deal with rejection. And I could probably do a whole video on that, but that was a great question. I hope that answers that. Just Paul says the applause sounds like the black and white crowd in Monty Python. Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? It may well be that one. I have some arrangements using it if you'd like to download. Okay. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate that. Martin says, I think a lot of us confuse too much for building excitement. Minimal tension is a good example of building excitement without a lot of tracks. Yes, for sure. Mika says, dealing with music theory students is a pain. Many want to incorporate all of their newly learned scales and techniques into one song. As you say, start out nice and simple. Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. The people that I teach and have taught in the past do exactly that, especially my high school kids and my undergraduates as well. If they have just learned in an Oriental and East African music class, if they've learned a whole bunch of exotic scales and exotic, tonal systems that are not, the same, they don't belong well with the 12-tone equal temperament system that Western music employs. If they've learned all of those kind of microtonal stuff, and then, they come to me and say, and they submit their music, and they've got all of these exotic things, and yet it's like mostly, they've got like a funk drum beat and a slap bass part, and then they've got these weird kind of microtonal African and Indian exotic scales, but it's all over kind of harmony that they know, but it doesn't fit. They've learned these new scales, but they don't fit with regular, major minor tonal harmonic systems. They just don't fit. And it's just like, okay, you've learned these new things. That's great that you're trying them out. That's great that you're experimenting with them, but you need to try and figure out what fits, how to fit those best into your music. You are going to have to adjust your arrangements somehow to make those particular exotic scales to fit. And that may mean that your regular equal temperament doesn't really fit anymore. So you're going to have to adjust your temperament of your music to fit the temperament of those exotic scales that you have just supplanted into your music. So, and then that's kind of a way for them to go off and kind of develop those new things that they've just learned. And yes, it is a pain in the butt. I agree. Let's see. Just Bob says starting out small is good. Most of us don't write orchestral orientated. I think the biggest mistake we go through is rewriting a song we like without realizing it. That is another big one. You are quite correct. Quite often your first instincts in music are the best ones. I have found that so many times. I work with an awful lot of singers, an awful lot of vocalists, and when they come and do vocal tracks, we will do maybe 5 or 6 takes. And really, to be honest, it's the first take that is the winner. And it's the first take, maybe elements of take 2 that are the ones that make the master comp for the vocal. And it's the same, I think, with anything. Your first instincts are usually the right ones. And especially the more you do something, the more your instincts get sharpened up. So the more likely your first instincts are going to be correct. And, that goes with the guitar solo. If you're wanting to nail the ideal solo for this particular song, and this is where a guitar player like Larry Carlton is just worth his weight in gold, because he can do that. He will listen to a track and he will totally inhabit the personality of that song and nail a guitar solo that you would think would never fit in any other song. And he does it first time. He does it first take. That you only have to listen to his solo on what the heck is the song that I'm now thinking of? Don't Take Me Alive by Steely Dan. Listen to that. Listen to that solo in the intro to the song. It is perfect. It starts with that opening kind of slow arpeggiated E7 sharp 9 chord, and then it launches off into this glorious guitar solo, and then you get into the vocal. But, Larry's playing on that song is flawless. It is perfect. And guess what? That was a first take. Or what about Steve Gadd's drum solo on Asia from a few years later? That was a one take as well. He did that whole drum chart from start to finish in one take. And that was the take they used. There was only one mistake in that whole thing, and that's when, in the midst of his solo, he accidentally caught the edge of a mic as he was going around the toms. And you hear it, but they kept it because they thought it sounded so great because of the rhythmic placement of tapping that mic with his stick. And it worked, but they kept it, mistake and all. So, yes, absolutely. Music to Motion with the $5 donation. Thank you very, very much for that. That is very kind. There was another donation. I'm going to go find out who it was because it has kind of disappeared. And I want to see who that was. We also had Alps Media with a $5 donation. And then finally, so far I say, we have Just Bob with a $15 donation. You guys are awesome. Thank you very, very much. That's $25 in total. You guys are amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate that an awful lot. I'm going to rattle on through because we've got about 20 minutes left. And you guys are chatting away. And I need to find questions. Lots of coffee and tea also helps. Yes, absolutely does. Also, changing pitch and half speed recording can be fun. Yeah, absolutely. I have done some of that myself. Let's see. I'm trying to find questions. If you got questions, don't forget, folks, that you need to put the red at Jonny Lipsham Studios there. Otherwise, I'm going to miss your question. I don't want to do that. Okay, Just Bob with a question. He says, could you send me the drums and keyboard stems from our exercise? Thanks. Would like to mess around with it. Sure, I will definitely do that. I will put those in the folder that we used the first time for you to send me the stuff. Let's see what else we have. I'm still looking for questions. Yeah, Just Bob is right. He has a point there. Please keep the talk about music and not about politics and not about religion, except where contextually relevant. If it is relevant to the song we are discussing, fair enough. But otherwise, let's keep political opinions and religious views out of the chat. Not that I'm not a religious person, because I am. I am a Christian. And so I have my own beliefs. You guys have your own beliefs, but they don't belong on this show. This show is about songwriting. And I want to keep it that way. Marcos has a question. Do you believe humans will be... Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the question I'm talking about. That is not really a music or a songwriting question. Well, it kind of is, I suppose. Do you believe humans will be worse than robots and not even engineering, but singing? So a lot of demands for robots will increase and artists and bands will suffer from this. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going to end up in a situation where you have robots making music. I mean, I think there will be a novelty case for that, but I don't think there will be a serious case for that is detrimental to performing artists, recording artists, and the engineers that facilitate those performing and recording artists. I don't see that because human beings, by our nature, we are creative. Now, that may mean that sometimes we create a machine to do a human being's job, and we've kind of done that to some degree with things like drum machines, drum loops, saxophone loops, you name it, loops. We've kind of done that to a degree, but hey, the cool thing about some of those things is that those drum loops are captures of a real drummer performing. Like the Matt Chamberlain Loop Loft library that I have. Those are recordings of Matt actually playing various drum sets in various different ways. And he is one of the world's most respected second maybe only to people like Vinnie Colaiuta and Steve Gadd, as a session drummer. Matt is an awesome drummer, and I have used a number of his loops on a few of my songs, and they're great, but they are recordings of a real person. Where it gets maybe a little sticky is when we start getting into, robots, computers just being wheeled onto the stage to perform something that somebody else has programmed, and there's no human element to the performance other than a human being programmed that. Now, there is an interesting experiment going on, which I don't know whether you guys are aware of it or not. But if you're not, I would say keep an eye out for this kind of thing on the internet, because I think it will be of interest to you. It's of interest to me, but there is an experiment taking place where they are teaching what they call a learning computer, a computer that learns. They are teaching a computer how to write a musical. And they're doing that by filling its brain with lots of musicals. So we're talking all the best musicals, like the two musicals that Leonard Bernstein wrote, On the Town and West Side Story. And, Lion King is a wonderful musical. But, they're also teaching it some of the worst ones as well, like Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, or any of the other Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice ones, like Cats, for example, which is awful. Personal opinion. But Cats is roaringly successful and has made Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice incredibly rich. But they are stuffing all of this content into the brain of this computer, and then they are, the learning algorithms within the computer. The hope is that the learning algorithms will get to work and it will eventually produce a musical all of its own, which will then be performed by real people. But it will have been written, the libretto and the music will have been written by a computer. That to me is an interesting experiment, at least to see how would it get on. How would it, the thing with musicals is that they are populated by people, populated by characters, populated by scenarios, like something like West Side Story is populated with extreme differences of characters and personalities and different scenarios, and it's a serious retelling of Romeo and Juliet with some of the best music ever written, and it's fantastic. Could a machine pull that off? I'm not so sure. Because I don't think a computer can understand random elements like personalities, like how human beings can behave illogically. And those are the things that make musicals work, is you have characters that behave illogically. They don't make sense. And it's that kind of sense, people operate on a sense of tension and release. Computers operate on a degree of tension and release in that they operate on ones and zeros, on and off. I suppose in that sense there is a contrast. There is tension and there is release. You have on and then you have off. So it'll be interesting to see what it comes up with. Let's see. Cancer created many memories. Very, very funny. Very, very funny indeed. That's a very good one, actually. You know what? That deserves one of these. Yeah, there you go. John Edgar says, generalists like to write for a wide variety of musical styles and audiences. Specializing is another way to go. What would be a plus or minus for either choice? See, here's the thing. What is popular? That is your first question. Not kind of generalists versus specialists. Because actually, people that write popular music are actually specialists. They're not generalists. They don't necessarily seek to appeal to the broadest popular audience. They seek to appeal to a particular niche that has the potential for what we would now call virality. It can go viral. What is the viral potential of this piece? And, there have been songs that have been on YouTube that are really nothing special songs that have gone viral. Why is that? It's because there are certain characteristics that make that song unique and stick out and appeal to people. Broadly appeal to people. Now that is a specialism all of its own. How do you broadly appeal to people without watering down the content? And, that's the biggest problem for musicians. It's a huge problem for politicians. It's a huge problem for economists and ecologists. How do you please the broadest possible number of people and monetize that pleasure without sacrificing the integrity of what you do? That is your biggest challenge before you even get to generalists, try and, a scattergun approach, and they try and hitting the mic there. They try and hit a broad spectrum of people. And then specialists will, they have a particular niche, like jazz nerds. They have a particular niche audience that's not very big compared to R&B, where the R&B audience is humongous, or the gospel audience is massive. And so you're kind of creating a juxtaposition that, jazz is very, very niche and specialized and has a small audience, whereas gospel has a much, much wider, broader audience, and never the twain shall meet. I don't think that's necessarily entirely the case. But I do take your point. And it's not a bad question. I just don't necessarily think it's entirely the right question. Because being a generalist doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a specialist, and being a specialist doesn't necessarily mean that you are not a generalist, because you would employ generalisms and specialisms in both camps, I think. But yeah, it's a good point to make. Let's see. Martin Weeks says a great example of this is the song Stairway to Heaven. The critics and so-called experts dismissed it as rubbish when it came out, and as we know, it became one of the biggest hits that Led Zeppelin ever came out with. Yeah, there was some criticism of it, for sure, and it has been covered a lot of times by a lot of artists, and therefore Led Zeppelin, the songwriters have made a lot of money out of it over the years. But yeah, I mean, Mozart in his lifetime, to a small group of people, was regarded as a genius, a musical genius who was pushing the boundaries of musical convention and, of his time. He was stretching harmonic concepts. He was stretching melodic concepts and taking melodic devices that everybody had been using during the Baroque period and, turning them on their head and applying them in ways that they had never been applied before. He helped pioneer, along with Handel, the symphonic structure. Prior to Mozart and Handel, the symphony didn't really exist. Certainly not in the way in which we understand a symphony. But Mozart died in poverty. Because, at the time, what he was doing, I guess, going back to John's argument, what he was doing was quite specialist. He was pushing boundaries of popular conventions. He was taking popular conventions and going, that's all well and good, but we could do this, and we could do this. He stretched the operatic form to almost breaking point and then rebuilt it and made opera the way we have it today. I mean, we have opera today mostly because of Mozart's innovations and his developments. But I mean, see how popular his work is now. All of these hundreds of years later, Mozart's estate is worth multiple millions of dollars. But in his lifetime, he died in poverty because he was regarded as kind of specialist, I suppose. And then shortly after his death, suddenly people loved his work. And it's just like, okay, about bloody time too. So I suppose that kind of answers John's point as well. I'll take that. I'm aware that the CPU experiment and methodology, some of the output I've heard sounds interesting. Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? Popular writing shoots yourself in the foot. It stifles creativity for a box, a form that those who control you want to be. Record companies, write what you feel, don't compromise. Yeah, you can say write what you feel and don't compromise, but sometimes you are in a position where you can't entirely do that. Like if the bulk of your professional income as a composer comes from writing jingles for radio stations or for news broadcasters, then you have to write to a brief. Or even if you're a film composer like John Williams or Michael Kamen, you still have to fulfill a technical brief, which means, yes, you have some wiggle room creatively, but there are certain constraints that are enforced upon you in order for you to fulfill the client's desires. So sometimes you can't always write exactly what you feel. But ultimately, I think, yes, that is the creative goal. And I think great film composers like John Williams, what makes them a genius is that not only do they 100% perfectly fulfill the brief that they are given by somebody like Steven Spielberg, not only do they fulfill that brief perfectly, but they are able to be incredibly creative within the constraints that are placed upon them. And that really, for me personally, that is where the rubber hits the road. If you have constraints placed upon you by the people that are purchasing your work, find ways to be creative within those constraints. Don't make those constraints something to be rebelled against. Don't make those restraints something to be viewed as a negative. See them as a positive. Okay, so the record company is saying they want this particular sound. They want my production to sound like, to have the same vibe as X other producers' work. Okay, that's fine. You have to find a way to be creative within that and stamp a little bit of your personality upon it that sets it apart from what they're really looking for. You kind of have to make the case that I can give you what you're asking for, I can give you what you want, it fulfills your brief, but it sounds like me. And I can give you a great example of this. The session drummer, Bernard Purdie. He was attending the Steely Dan sessions for Babylon Sisters, which went on the Gaucho record. And, he was asked to play a shuffle rhythm for this particular song. And he said, well, shuffles are kind of a little bit, certainly at the time in the late 70s, early 1980s, they were done to death. They were a little bit overdone. And so he said, sure, I can give you a shuffle. I can give you the shuffle thing. It's halftime, which is what you're after. Let me play you the Purdie shuffle. And so he played them the Purdie shuffle. I said, look, it's halftime, it's funky, it's a shuffle, it ticks all three of those boxes, it gives you what you want, but it sounds like me. And so that's what he did, and that's what went down on that record. And it's a fantastic song, and Bernard Purdie's shuffle makes that song groove for decades. It really does. It's a phenomenally funky, phenomenally groovy thing that he did, and it makes that song. I mean, if you were to put just an ordinary, dun da da dun da da dun da da dun da da dun on Babylon Sisters, it would wreck the song. It would kill it. But Bernard Purdie came in, said, I will give you exactly what you want. It fulfills your brief, but it has my stamp of creativity on it. And they said, great, we'll have that. So that's the skill as a musician, as a composer, working within specific briefs, within specific rules. Here it is. I have fulfilled your brief. I have ticked all of your boxes, but it sounds like me. And it has my personality on it. And being able to sell that with ridiculous confidence like Bernard does is a gift. It's a skill all of its own. I mean, he would set up his drums and you have two signs either side of his drum set. I don't know if you've heard this story. One sign on one side would say, you've done it. And on the other side, the sign would say, you've gone and hired Bernard Purdie, the hitmaker. And that was the kind of confidence that he had in what he could do, what he could deliver to his clients. Because he had a very creative brain and he could creatively apply all of his skills and everything he had in his toolbox to not only play what he wanted to, but make sure it fulfilled the brief that he was given by the producers. So that's kind of a little bit of a long answer to that question. Martin says, something often overlooked is that compromise can actually improve one's arrangement skills, forces a different attitude, and that's growth. Yeah, And actually, I would argue it's not just about compromise, it's about humility quite often. And we have to remember that this is something that has not changed for hundreds of years. But musicians are servants. I'll say it again. Musicians are servants. That's what we are. We serve the people. And that we need to remember that. We serve them. And if we have that attitude of service, we serve them, and we find creativity within that that service, within serving the people, then that's how you become great. That's how you become great and known as great for what you do. Because you choose to serve and put your audience and put them first and make them the most important thing. As soon as you make your audience the most important thing, you know what? You start enjoying writing for them. Whatever it is that they want you to do, even if it means that you're writing stuff that you ordinarily wouldn't write, you actually find yourself enjoying writing for them and being creative within writing for them because you are serving them. It's funny how it works. But as soon as you make that switch in your brain and that switch in your heart, it becomes a lot more fun to do sometimes really, really crappy jobs in the music business. Let's see. Jonny Edgar says, does the idea of integrating 20th century music with meditative new age music as hybrid genre work for your ear as you think about it? I don't tend to listen to that kind of music, I'll be honest, but I would never say no to kind of blending different musics together. Yes, they can work. Yes, you can have microtonal, broadly Middle Eastern or broadly Southeast Asian or Polynesian music mixed with lo-fi hip-hop. You can absolutely do it. And you can absolutely make it work. And who knows, you may well end up creating an entire genre by yourself that becomes ridiculously successful. Just remember that if you take what I have just said and you run with it and you make a fortune out of it, it was my idea first. Gerard is here. Hello, Gerard. He says, this is Gerard Stroh in Tracy, California. I think that is. I like the John Williams and Larry Carlton. Great musician. I use Studio One on my recordings. I like your channel. I also go on HST. Well, thank you very much, Gerard. And thank you for being here. I appreciate it a lot. And thank you for your kind words. BB Jacobs says, how do I get around clipping in my recording, get the master closer to Apple digital quality? That is a skill all of its own. That is called mastering. Mastering. And really, I probably would need to devote a bunch of shows to that subject because it's a little bit complicated. But one of the ways in which you can avoid clipping your master fader is to make sure that your gain on your events in Studio One is at a conservative level to start with. I don't think I have clipped the master bus in a long time. And the reason being, not because I turned my master bus down. No, my master bus stays at 0 dB, but the input gain from my audio events coming into my channels is set at conservative levels so that I have plenty of headroom and it never clips. Now, if I want to print my mix so that I can listen to it in the car or I can listen to it on my earbuds or whatever, then there is a little trick I do. I put the limiter plugin in the post section of the master fader and I set the ceiling and the threshold to -1 dB. And then I turn up the input until I get a tiny little bit of limiting going on. Like maybe 1 or 1.5 dB worth of limiting every now and then happening. And then I know it's in broadly the sweet spot. And then I can print that out. I can export that mix to Dropbox or something like that. And I can just pull it up on my phone, earbuds in, and I can listen to my mix at the same kind of level as I would listen to a Steely Dan song or a John Coltrane record. I know that they are going to fit at the same volume levels if I do that. And that's kind of a rough and ready, down and dirty way that you can do that. But you have to start with having your audio events gain levels set at a conservative level. And that is something that is broadly called gain staging. I don't think in the digital domain that it really is gain staging in the traditional sense, but it certainly is a method whereby you have all the inputs of all of your audio events at, broadly speaking, the same kind of level. You kind of set a level and then you kind of stick with that for all of your input levels. Whether that's actual gain staging in the analog sense of it, I don't think it is. But there. Mika says, please do a few shows on mastering. I would love that with bells on. Well, I will issue a disclaimer immediately to that, Mika. I'm not a mastering expert. I know how to do some of the bare basics of mastering. I have been taught extremely well by a British mastering engineer by the name of Ian Shepherd. I have taken a couple of his courses, and I know him personally a little bit. We're friends, and we talk a wee bit on Facebook, and we talk a wee bit on Twitter as well. So I know him pretty well. And he's a mutual friend of mine, Joe Gilders. So yeah, so I've taken a few of his courses. I'm interested in the subject, but I would never say for a minute that I have mastered mastering. But I know a little bit. I know enough to kind of get something up to a level that at least I am happy with. And really, with my mastering skills at the moment, I'm happy with that. So long as I'm happy with how my master sounds, that's okay. So yeah, so that's where I'm at with that. But I could certainly do it. Jonny is here. Hello, Jonny. Glad you're here, buddy. He says, I will never do another mastering lesson as long as I live. Never, ever, ever. Yeah, there are some techniques to it, and there are some skills. I mean, there really is no wonder why mastering is quite frequently referred to as the dark art of mastering. Really isn't that dark, but yeah, there are things to learn, and there are, it's not straightforward. You can do very, 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 very bare bones simple mastering with just a limiter and an EQ and call it a day. If you've got a really, really belting mix that sounds fantastic straight out of the gates, that's all you need to do. But sometimes that's not all you need to do. Sometimes you need to kind of address a couple of things that maybe the mixing engineer overlooked, or you have to maybe just sweeten up what the mix engineer has already done. So that's where good critical listening skills are really important for EQ in particular. But yeah, it's a whole show all of its own. And we are 10 minutes over time. Mika says, come on, man. You live, you learn, we learn. It's unbecoming to see you do. Yeah, I don't think he's doing that. I don't think he's doing that at all, Mika. I think he like me would recognize where our limitations are, to be honest, and kind of where the edge of our knowledge and our skill sets are. I recognize where mine are. And sometimes you kind of have to stick to those, at least until you are comfortable enough with those limitations that you are able to push them a little bit, and you are comfortable with pushing them a little bit to the point where you think, okay, I maybe have enough confidence with this now and enough authority with this now to be able to teach it to somebody that doesn't know how to do it at all. I mean, really, the best teachers are the ones that are a few steps ahead of the learners. So if you have people that know nothing about mastering, but you know enough of the bare bones basics, you can teach those that know nothing. But you can't really teach somebody that knows a lot about mastering, because they will say, actually, no, this is there are some more higher level techniques you can use. But yeah. But that is the end of the show. And I want to thank every one of you for coming this evening and for the $25 of donations. You guys are ridiculously, incredibly generous. I love you all very much. And I will see you all on Sunday, because on Sunday it's going to be back here for Sunday Night Live. But before I go, I'm going to make mention of, if you are in the UK and you are a Studio One user, please come on over to the Studio One meetup. There is an ad for it already in the Studio One, the Persona Studio One group, and in the HST groups as well. There is an ad for that already, if you're not aware of it. But I will be putting something up again tomorrow, and on the day itself I will put up another ad. Come and sign up and come and join in the conversation on Zoom for Studio One users in the UK on Friday night, 8 p.m. UK time. So I will see you all then. Good night. Suppose we might have some of this.
Against me, my back against the wall, holding all the words, cards I feel 2 feet tall. I'll stand and shout, no holding back. Do or die, gonna dig myself a hole. Oh, do or die, gonna dig myself a hole. Now I'm hanging tough and I'm never falling back. When defense fails, I'm going on the attack. I stand